These attacks were targeted at not only Christians, but also foreign tourists. How does this bout of violence differ from past instances of terrorism?
Well, I mean, it's very significant. I mean, Sri Lanka has really experienced no mass casualty attacks like this in the decades since its civil war ended. You know, as you mentioned, this is an attack that targeted or that killed 32 foreigners. And it targeted the five-star hotels that many foreigners stay at. So this clearly is going to be a major shock, or it has been a major shock to Sri Lanka. And it's going to pose some major challenges to its tourism industry, its foreign tourism industry, which is a major component of Sri Lanka's economy.
How bad is the Sri Lankan economy performing right now? Because we have heard of this huge $1.5 billion bailout already to the IMF.
Right. Well, I mean, the economy has performed relatively well in the sense that GDP growth has been relatively stable in recent years, particularly as the end of the violence from the Civil War has allowed the economy to grow and for foreign investors to come in. But the big concern for Sri Lanka's economy is debt. It's heavily indebted. In fact, government debt in Sri Lanka is about 75% of GDP, which is huge. A lot of this debt is driven by Chinese loans, which has put Sri Lanka in a very difficult spot. So Sri Lanka needs the revenue that it gets from foreign tourism, and foreign tourists contributed about $5 billion in 2017. So this is revenue that Sri Lanka needs. It's revenue that could be threatened if you do have a situation where foreign tourists stop coming to Sri Lanka in the aftermath of this horrific attack that did target foreigners.
Now, Sri Lanka is, of course, no stranger to civil unrest, but in the wake of these latest attacks, what sort of security do you expect we could see put in place by the government to protect tourists? What are you looking out for there?
Well, clearly the government's going to do everything it can. Just because this is a government, it clearly has made it very clear that it's going to do everything possible to restore security, and particularly given the significance of this attack, that it was such a so many casualties, a mass casualty attack, and it happened at a time when the country had been relatively stable, which is significant given that this is a country that has experienced horrific levels of violence year after year after year for several decades, really until 2009. And we've seen some of the measures that the government in Sri Lanka has already taken. As I think your reporter mentioned, social media has essentially been blocked, which I think was done to prevent stirring up rumors against particular factions or groups in Sri Lanka that could risk leading to more violence. I think that for the government, the main goal now is to try to restore some semblance of order, not just so that the foreigners could keep coming to the country, but more importantly, so that the country itself can have some semblance of stability and some semblance of hope. Because understandably, there's a tremendous amount of shock going on right now in the country.